We got on the highway, and I was quiet for about 2 miles, maybe.
Yeah,
2 miles,
maybe.
not even 5 minutes. And she says, what have you been thinking?
Yeah, I was just curious, because, you're a 6, and the reason why I asked the question is because I literally wasn't thinking anything. Like, my brain
I
just,
don't even know what that would be
I
like.
can't
know.
imagine.
Yeah.
What?
That doesn't rings true to me.
like, I was
I,
looking, at the scenery, but I was really kind of checked out, and all the 9s out there totally understand what I'm saying. No one else will understand, maybe. But I asked him, I'm like, so what were you thinking? Literally, for like 5 minutes, he just went and went and went and told me all these things.
And she got upset with me that I shared it all with her.
Overwhelmed. I was like, how is it even
Like I did
possible that
something
you
wrong.
thought of this much stuff? And then I kind of felt bad for him because I was like, ooh.
Oh, God.
How many things do you have in that head, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, can't you just like turn it off, Hey everyone, this is Beth.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. And we're here to help you to understand yourself with astonishing clarity so that you can break free from self-condemnation, fear, and shame by knowing and experiencing the unconditional love, forgiveness, and freedom in Christ. Well, if you didn't know, we're also on YouTube, so go watch the podcast there, like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming content that we release.
Well, today we're going to be talking about type 6s. And so being a type 6, this is going to be very interesting. Talking about myself, but our wings are 5 and 7. Now, if you don't know much about wings and you're maybe new to the Enneagram, be sure to head over to episode 160 where we explain Enneagram wings in more detail. Essentially, wings are the 2 types directly next to your main type. So if you're a 6, you're not going to have a 2 wing or a 4 wing. You have a type 5 and a type 7 wing. Now for Beth here, she's a type 9, so she's got an 8 and a 1 wing.
Yep. So we get to talk about the type 6s today, in their wings. But what we want to remember is that they remain their main type, which is the driving force behind why they think, feel, and behave according to their core motivations. So their core fear, desire, weakness, and longing. And their core motivations are their perspective of life and then how they interpret what they see and react to it. And so we want to take a look at those as well. But what we also want to realize is that your wings have their own core motivations and they're trying to influence your main type based on how they interpret the world. And so it's really important for us to understand these core motivations of the types we're connected to so we can see how and when they're trying to influence us.
Well, because of the relationship that we have with our wings, as well as the influence that they play in our lives, we're going to be referring to wings as parts of us, which we discuss more in our new book, More Than Your Number. Be sure to check that out because we're going to give you a full understanding of how EIP, or Enneagram Internal Profile, and specifically wings, how they function for us. Talking about your wings as parts may actually seem a little strange at first, but the reality is that we already speak this way, and we're going to illustrate that in our conversations today. Because we often will say to others, well, maybe I want to do this, but I also want to do this, or I feel this way, and then I feel something competing inside me. And sometimes those are actually wings showing up in your life. Wings bring their own perspectives based on their core motivations and bring up at times contradicting thoughts and feelings, which can cause us to feel stuck, torn, or indecisive. And they can be enhancing to our life relationally as well as living out our calling. So we're going to be introducing our guest here in a few moments, but always keep this in mind that we will always remain our main type with the core motivations of our main type, as well as experiencing the influence of our various wings. And for the 6, that's going to be type 5 and type 7.
Yeah, so before we dive into hearing from our guest, let me just paint a picture of the type 6 so you're really familiar with them. Now, they're the faithful guardians. They're so reliable, hardworking, dutiful, and they're steady people. Now, they have a great sense of humor, so I'm sure we're going to have a fun time today. But they are the ones that foresee all the possible problems. They're fiercely loyal, committed to making sure everything goes the way it needs to go to ensure safety and security for everyone they're committed to. And type sixes may appear calm at times on the outside, but they have this internal committee that is constantly chiming in with contradictory thoughts of all the various possibilities, especially worst case scenarios. And so, what happens with that is they can be plagued with this internal fear, indecisiveness, catastrophic thinking, and a lot of self doubt. For them, this turns up as anxiety. Again, whether you see it or you don't see it, it's running in the background of their mind. And so they're going to look outside of themselves for sources that they can trust to help them to make the decisions that feel safe and accurate for them. So the core motivations for the six is the core fear of being without support, guidance, and security, to fear itself, to be blamed, targeted, alone, and physically abandoned. But their core desire is to have security, guidance, and support. But they struggle with the core weakness of anxiety. And this is where they're scanning the horizon, trying to predict and prevent negative outcomes, especially worst case scenarios. And so you're going to see that they're constantly remaining in this kind of state of apprehension and worry. Now, their core longing is to hear and experience you are safe and secure.
Well, our guests today are Kara and Adam. So thankful that you've decided to join us today. Kara, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. So I am a certified Enneagram coach. So that has been a fun adventure with you guys as of last summer. So I went through the course with Adam as one of the great instructors of that course. So that's been just a delight. But yeah, my background was I was a missionary kid. My background is then in social work. And I started discovering that Enneagram, I would say about 6 years ago. And at the time, I actually thought I was a 2. I had taken an assessment and I was thinking I was a 2 with a 3 wing. And it was through meeting with the coach myself and just really digging deep. I started to just really resonate with that core motivation of the 6. And it was actually the coach who said, why don't you explore the 6? Like I hear a lot of the 2 in you and that could be a part of you, but she was very gentle and just encouraged me to explore it. And at first I can't be a 6. I really struggled with seeing myself as in the head triad because I viewed myself as more emotional. So I put myself into that feeling triad. But as I started using it just for growth and just really digging deep, I took some courses about the Enneagram before I decided to become a coach and started to explore my subtype and then my wings. It really started to solidify the 6 part. I really resonated the core motivations of just feeling that safe and security, but I was struggling with some of the other parts. And then learning about myself as a self-preservation 6 and hearing the words of warmth and friendly and just people and alliances, that it just kind of hit the nail on the head. And then as I started learning about wings and really exploring the 5 and the 7, I saw that showing up. People would often say, I feel that kind of energy from you. So yeah, it's been a joy now to use what I've learned in my own life as a mom of 3 teenagers and a wife, and how it's helped myself and my marriage now as a coach to be sharing that with others. It's been a huge
Kara, do
joy.
you resonate with this thought that, particularly within Christianity here in the States, that for a female, that it's almost like there's a sense to where to be a godly woman is to be a female too. Do you resonate with that?
I do. So my background, I just touched on it, was I was an MK, which stands for missionary kid. So I was born in Congo, Africa, and lived there until I was 12. So I was right in the throes of a lot of what you're saying. So I think that desire for, as a woman to be that nurturer and service and love and care and sacrificial love were absolutely things that rang true for me. So I do resonate with that. I've seen that to be the
You
case.
bring up another dynamic here. Do you feel American
I do
or
now.
Congolese?
Yeah,
You
I
do
do.
now?
Yeah. My formative years were all on the mission field until I was about
Sure.
12. So of course we would come, to the States here and there. But for sure, those early memories were all there. We were in the really remote area. So it was just rainforest, no infrastructure for roads. And then when I was 9, I went to boarding school. You can
Okay.
imagine as a type 6, not knowing I was a type 6.
Right.
all of that I've now been processing through the lens of a 6, of how that felt to be a little girl, just pulled away from my safe person, who was my mom at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
put in a situation that felt scary and felt like, who is that person? Like the rug just kind of got taken out from under me.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow.
Well, look back on
Well,
those years, it's for sure a mixture. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of pain in the story as well.
Okay.
When I think about those years of boarding school and just some of the experiences that happened to me there, and the lens in which, as a 6, I look back on that and those feelings of abandonment and just struggling to find who can I trust, who can be that person for me.
Well, and I think a self-preservation 6 female can definitely easily mistype themselves as a 2, because 6s in the head triad are very emotional. They're actually in the emotional reactive triad. And so the emotions are going to come up, though they're really in the head, right? They have a lot of emotions. And then, of course, like you were saying, just being in that Christian sphere, needing to serve and to help and to give, totally makes sense why 2 felt at first more true for you. But I'm really, happy and glad that you had a coach that would gently walk you through the process. I mean, for Jeff, he's not self-preservation. He's more on the 1-to-1 6, which he thought he was an 8. And he had someone also say, you're not an 8. It was a little bit more abrupt for you. It's a little bit harder to.
Yeah, I set aside the Enneagram for a year. Because I was so frustrated with it.
Yeah, you got
stupid thing.
Kind of skeptical.
Yes.
Why
Let's not get into my stuff.
Well, we are, but
We are.
let's first, Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Adam Breckenridge.
All I really want to do is get into Jeff's stuff now. That's the only thing that I want to do. Jeff, I've got a
Poke the
question.
bear.
How old were you the first time? No, we're not going to do that. So
I was really about to go there with you, Adam.
I know you would. We ride or die, man. We ride or die together.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always one of my favorite things to do, to spend time with you and with our listeners and viewers on the podcast. So my name's Adam. Serve as the director of coaching with Your Enneagram Coach, which means I get to do what I love. I get to work with men and women who are building their coaching practices, changing the world through their coaching practices, and men and women who aspire to become coaches. And I love doing that because that's my story. It was, I've got a wife and 3 daughters, and we were kind of drowning in 2015, going through the ministry burnout stuff and a lot of hurt. And I met an Enneagram coach, which I didn't know what the Enneagram was. He wanted to work with me. He wanted to work with my wife, Carrie, and made us take this assessment. Jeff, you were talking about your skepticism toward the Enneagram, and I'm going to put this thing aside. I kind of came into it that way, looking at this as very skeptical. What is this? A lot of questions. Is this a safe tool? And my coach just invited me to trust him. And I said, okay, I'll trust you and I'll do this. And so when I read my report and then he walked through the report with me, it was one of those things where the proof's in the pudding here. Like this is, I've said this probably on this podcast before, but the only way I know how to say it is it felt like I was inside of Psalm 139, where I believe it's David is saying, I felt like God was searching me and knowing me. And it was a really vulnerable journey. It was like simultaneously, I felt so alive because that's all that the heart really wants, is to be seen and known and loved. So it was like beautiful. Like I felt so seen, so understood. It was also the scariest thing because I felt so seen, so understood. So, but it was one of those things where we couldn't deny what the Lord was showing us through the tool. So Carrie and I sat with the tool for about a year, just using it with ourselves, using it in our marriage, starting to use it with how we show up in our parenting. And then it was one of those things where we were like, I've got to coach people with this. I've got to like serve other people with this tool. So I started coaching. Beth, Jeff and I met and developed a friendship, and I immediately became a huge fan of Your Enneagram Coach and devoured all your social content. I probably harassed you in those days, honestly, early on. I might have been like stalker level. I'm not totally sure, but it
Well,
worked
if you
out.
were
I mean,
stalking us, Adam, we wouldn't have known because you would have done so secretively. So
that's
it,
right. That's true.
um,
That's true. Um, so that's a little bit about me, and I've been working with the Enneagram now since 2015, and loving it, and love what I get to do.
yeah. Well, thanks so much for both of you for joining us today to share with us a little bit about what it's like being a six with these things called wings. Now, it's very popular, common for people to talk about wings as they're we have one wing with a dominant wing. Now, for our presentation today, we're actually going to be talking about both wings and how they show up in our lives, both in healthy and unhealthy ways. And just like a bird that has two wings, so do we. And so we're going to start off with the type 5 wing. I call this type 5 part of my heart, I call him Bob. Bob was a very influential mentor in my life and had a lot of great influence. But we're going to talk about what it looks like for the 5 wing when it shows up in healthy ways. So the type 5's core motivations are: one is core fears to being annihilated, invaded, thought incapable or ignorant, having obligations placed on them, or having their energy depleted. Their core desire is to be knowledgeable, capable, and competent people. Now, you'll notice this part of the type 6 because it's observant, wise, curious, analytical, intellectual, insightful, emotionally distant, and independent. It feels it needs more knowledge to move forward competently. Therefore, it'll withdraw to gain the information it needs to help you feel guided and secure as you courageously engage in life circumstances. Now, your 5 wing also helps you to courageously engage with life's uncertainties, knowing that you are highly resourceful and prepared. You support the disadvantaged with your insights and information and generously give others the wisdom and knowledge you have gathered over time. You're also able to intellectually pull apart things and then conceptualize new ways to put them back together.
Yeah.
So let's start with you, Kara, first. How do you see the 5 part of your heart showing up in your life?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I see it in the first kind of half of my life. I'm 42 now, so my kids are getting older, so I'm seeing the 5 more. I think the 7 was more of an obvious thing for me, but I'm seeing how, and I've heard that to be true, right? That kind of you start to lean on another wing as we age and whatnot and grow. So I'm starting to see that 5 showing up. I see little glimpses of my little 6 self. I think it also, I have a strong desire to care for those less fortunate, which is it's just 6 part that caring for the underdog. But I see that as part of the 5 in me. But a few ways I see the 5 showing up is one, I do love to learn. I wouldn't consider myself like an academic or an intellectual, like I might see some of my 5 friends, but I do love to deep dive. And I really saw that showing up actually with the Enneagram. My background is social work. I have a degree in social work and a minor in psychology. So people and learning, like those things always just capture my interest. But when I learned of the Enneagram 5 years ago and then really started just exploring it, I just kind of could not get enough. It was just podcasts, books, everything, just really researching. And I see how now as a coach, how all that research and just the stuff that I have in my brain that I wouldn't have normally thought of myself as that type of person, that I'm able to pull that out, right? And rely on that. It helps me to be focused. It helps me to be kind of grounded when I feel the anxiety stirring in me. I think it also gives me objectivity and it's also helped me with boundaries. I think even as a social worker, we talk a lot about boundaries in relationships and whatnot. And I think the 5 helps me to set up those healthy boundaries, and as a coach as well. And to be able to look at people's lives and perspectives and stories with objectivity. I think the 6 part of me can pull into the worry or just the anxiety, and that 5 just helps me to see the situation for what it is. And it also gives me, yeah, like I said, that boundaries in my own life with starting, and I see this more and more, needing time to just recharge. And I wasn't that way so much as teenager and 20s. But now if I'm out or doing a presentation or with people, like I need to be home and recharge. And I see that
Yeah.
as a gift to me now. So I see that a little bit of that self-preservation and managing my
Yeah.
resources of sleep and whatnot. But I see that 5 really some healthy things. Do you want me to go into some of the more ways that I see it showing up in unhealthy ways, or do we want to talk
Yeah,
about
we're
that
going to do
later?
that next. Adam, I'd love to hear too. How do you see the 5 part of your heart showing up in healthy ways?
Kara nailed it. Just I feel like I could say what Kara said, but to put it in my own words, the 5 part of me I've noticed really gives me the gift of curiosity. So this is a part of me that I've noticed helps me learn and grow because it's a part of me that's always asking questions, always digging and exploring and chasing a discovery. So it's a part of me that pushes me to read, pushes me to buy books, pushes me to ask a lot of questions, hopefully before I make judgments. And then similar to what you said there, Kara, the older I get, the more I respect how my 5 wing helps me draw boundaries and recharge. I used to feel a lot of shame saying no to someone, and I'm not saying I don't still struggle with that, but I also used to work in working environments where working 70 hours a week and being exhausted by it was bragged about and worn like a badge of honor. And in my 20s and early 30s, I really shamed my 5 part when it would show up and encourage me to slow down and not work as much and take a day off. And I would, call myself names that I'm not going to repeat out loud on the podcast because I wanted to maybe slow down a little bit and draw a boundary. And it was this way of really shaming myself. And so now that I'm 40, I'm not necessarily a spring chicken, and I'm learning to appreciate what a gift this part of me is and how it helps me to say no if I need to say no and take a Sabbath, take a day off. So I'm really learning to appreciate. That's some of the healthy ways I notice this part of me showing up.
Now, what's interesting is being the wife of a 6 who had a very dominant 7 wing early on, and you guys are the same.
Yes.
I'm curious if you experience the same thing as I have. So now that Jeff's 5 wing is much more active,
Yeah.
he too is much more at times quiet and contemplating and thinking. Like we'll be in the car and it used to be like music up, like talking all the time, engagement, like really wanting
Yeah.
to connect.
Yeah.
And I was in the last year and a half, it's been much more quiet. Music may or may not be on. And if it's on, it's kind of quiet. And I'm almost as the spouse, like, is everything okay?
It's so funny. She'll say things like, "Can you hear that?"
Yeah, well, I'm older, so then I'm like, I can't really hear the music. Are you enjoying the music? It's not even like
funny.
up.
I recognized how much I was working out my anxiety by talking it through with you. So you held it for years. But there was one
I
moment
did do the greatest.
we
with
got
it.
on the we got on the highway, and I was quiet for about 2 miles, maybe.
Yeah,
2 miles,
maybe.
not even 5 minutes. And she says, "What have you been thinking?"
Yeah, I was just curious, like, because, you're a 6. And the reason why I asked the question is because I literally wasn't thinking anything. Like, my brain
I
just,
don't even know what that would be
I
like.
can't
know.
imagine.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't rings true to me.
like, I was
I,
looking, at the scenery, but I was really kind of checked out. And all the 9s out there totally understand what I'm saying. No one else will understand, maybe. But I asked him, I'm like, so what were you thinking? Literally, for like 5 minutes, he just went and went and went and told me all these things.
And she got upset with me that I shared
so
it all with her.
overwhelmed. I was like, how is it even
Like I did
possible that
something
you
wrong.
thought of this much stuff? And then I kind of felt bad for him because I was like, ooh.
Oh God.
How many things do you have in that head, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, can you just like turn it off? I think I
Yeah.
started to dissociate even as you were
Sure.
talking.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
I
yeah,
can
you
see
went-
you at times. So she's gone.
Well,
She's
and
headed
Adam,
out the
you have
door.
a type 9 wife. Does she kind of done the same thing with you at times?
This is the absolute funniest thing to me because it's the same. It's the same dance. Same thing. Same thing. If I'm quiet, she wants to know if I'm okay. And if she asks what I'm thinking and I tell her, she gets overwhelmed. I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing.
And it was so funny. It's like the quietness, because I'm more introverted, I kind of enjoy it, but I don't know what to do with it because it's not
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
for 20, we've been married now 27 years. So 25 of those years was all of this connectivity and
Mhm.
talking, and which
Yeah.
was great and exhausting all at the same time. And now that it's not there as much, I sometimes don't know what
Your
to do.
quiet stubbornness won in the long run.
In the
Yeah.
long run.
It just took a long time.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed the same trend, and Carrie would say she's noticed the same trend. But what's funny is when I get around my friends, like if
Mhm.
Jeff and I are in the same room, that's whenever
Oh, yeah.
I call my seven. It's this buddy energy. It's
Mhm.
almost this like, what do you guys want to do? Like
Right.
Yes.
let's do something. And it could be like it could be as extreme as like let's set something on fire, or you know, let
Uh,
me show you some funny TikToks that I've recently discovered. Like,
yeah,
it's
I'm
Yeah.
game.
and anything
Let's
in
just see what
between.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk about the unhealthy ways the 5 can show up.
Yes. Okay. So, with the unhealthy ways that the 5 can show up, is that not only is the mind of the 6 going to be running, but so is the mind of the 5. So, you've got competing anxieties going on. So, the 6 is thinking about all the things that might happen, negatively speaking. It could be relationally, could be just circumstances, but the 5 is going to be the intellect of this. And so they're going to research and try to strategize all of the ways to avoid these pitfalls that might happen. And it can become all consuming. And the 5 feels that they never have enough information. So you're going to see more frenetic energy. They're going to be more withdrawn, independent, maybe isolated. They're going to be more compartmentalized and secret, and really kind of hone in on their relationships, the ones they're committed to ensure that everything is going to go well. You're also going to see, versus the 7, you're going to see this 5 part of their heart to become very fixated on just a few relationships and be more suspicious, like who can I trust, who can I not trust. So the 5 can be very cynical when it's not healthy, and the 6 definitely is going to be suspicious. So it's going to be gauging a lot about the relationship and how things are going. And if it feels unsafe, it's going to withdraw and pull back a lot more and be more isolated. So, with saying that, Adam, why don't we have you go first? How does the type 5 in an unhealthy way show up in your life?
Yeah. Well, you're picking up, just listening to you explain that, you're really highlighting this truth that a lot of writers have picked up on, that with every gift there is a bit of gold and there's shadow. There's always a shadow side to the gift. And I feel like my 5 gives me this gift of curiosity and learning and exploring and researching and digging, but the shadow side of that is when all of that becomes overthinking, and really procrastination. I can't tell you how many times I could have finished a sermon by lunch on Wednesday, but I had to read 3 more books, 11 more articles, listen to 5 more podcasts, uh, because I feel like I didn't know enough to preach the text. And I struggle with this fear of not knowing enough and being incompetent. I mean, I've literally had nightmares of I'm going to stand up there and not know what to say. I'm not going to even know anything about this text or know how to apply it, or I'm just so that fear of, and I understand that the type 5 is part of me. My heart is just trying to protect me from that fear
Yeah.
and keep that from happening. But if I'm not careful, this can really paralyze me.
Yeah,
The other thing,
that's one thing. I'm glad that you said that, Adam. Sorry to interrupt
yeah,
you.
no, go ahead.
But one thing I didn't mention was that when we talk about the unhealthy parts of our wings or just our type as a whole, it has good intentions. It's
Yeah,
trying to help,
yeah,
but it's ill-equipped and it may not have the full perspective. And so we want to treat it, with dignity and be attuned to it and welcome it and not shame it or condemn it. That just only makes things worse. And so how
yeah.
can we lovingly come alongside it and guide it into a healthier perspective? So I'm sorry, continue. I just
No,
wanted
that's
to
been the biggest
reiterate
thing
that.
for me. That's been the biggest thing for me. And we like, that's why we hit on that so heavy in the book. It's like that kindness really does soften the part and open the door for change. I have found that if I shame this part of my heart or come at it with aggression, it's only going to dig in its heels. I mean, it's just it's going to get more anxious. It's going to get, and so, no, the only other thing I was going to say is just it's the shadow side to setting boundaries, So like, I feel like my 5 gives me this gift of setting boundaries, but when I'm not in a healthy spot, I want to stay there. The walls that I build around me get taller and thicker, and I might withdraw from everyone, including my family. And Carrie will, tell me quickly when that happens. But it's one of the less healthy ways. Again, trying to help me, trying to protect me, and it knows that I need to recharge. But if I'm not careful, I can disappear completely.
So, Kara, what about you?
Thanks. I do resonate with a lot of what Adam said. A couple ways I see that kind of unhealthy side for me is really in that analysis paralysis of getting stuck in my head. I mean, as a 6, we are all those, inner committee voices are always chiming in, but just that when I feel stressed too. It's just the kind of hamster wheel of just complete inability to make a decision. And I think for myself, I see, sometimes my relying not so much on, I think the 6 part of me is looking for other people to tell me what to do in those situations. So I get stuck wanting my husband, just tell me what to do, or texting another friend or texting and just not trusting that inner part, and that just going where I'm just completely in the head, I see as being that 5 part at times, where I'm losing a little bit of the connection with my body or with my emotions in that situation. And I definitely resonate with what Adam said about the shadow side to boundaries. I think, the early part of myself really I don't see that so much showing up. I'm extroverted, so I'm very social, but I'm starting to see in subtle ways how I can at times be a little stingy with my time when I'm feeling stressed, especially with my kids, or my husband, even like, when I'm kind of get to the point sometimes where I'm like, I just want to be done. I want to check out. I want to relax. And I'm moving into that space of kind of, I see how my 5 is trying to protect me. It knows I need to relax. I need to, unwind before I go to sleep because I need my rest. And I see all of those things, but I can see how I can be frustrated. Like if something is supposed to end at 9 o'clock at night, let's say, and it goes late, and I internally start to get a little activated. Like, no, I'm not going to be able to go home, and I'm not going to have my unwinding time with my husband. And so I see that sometimes as a negative in me, just because I know again, it's that 5 protecting me, but I can see how sometimes it goes overboard. I think it doesn't account for the fact that, God will give me refreshments and He will meet me in those moments where I just want to draw the line in the sand, or when my kids want to have a conversation late at night and I'm like, I'm done. I can't do it. Which teenagers like to have conversations late at night.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I wonder if you guys experience this as it relates to the 5 part of our hearts. So what am I now, Beth? 47, 48? Yeah, about to be 48. Yeah. And I've had a lot of experience. I've had a lot of training. And I mean, my Evernote file system is just massive over the years of collected materials that I've never gone back to.
But just in case.
But I will. There have been moments that I do. But so it relates to avarice and hoarding information. So gathering all this information. But I find too, so I can fear not being prepared, but I can also feel like, hey, I don't know if this person will affirm or appreciate what I know. And so I will arrogantly not share that part of my heart. Do you guys experience that as well? Or am I just crazy?
No.
Being stingy with your
That's
knowledge.
right. Where it's like, you don't know how good I am at what I do. And I'm not even going to show you because I don't think you'll value it. But at the same time feeling, I don't know what I'm doing.
Sure.
I have no confidence in myself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I absolutely resonate with that. And, Jeff, you and I have made jokes about how similar we are in terms of, I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but we hold on to quotes. Like we remember quotes. And like, I don't have a photographic memory, but I can tell you like Oh yeah, it's somewhere around page 27. I know it's like in the upper left part of the page.
Right.
And Kurt Thompson said this. This is what he said. And it's not because listen, and I'm not, it's not false humility. It's not brilliance. I think it's the 5 part of me that so desperately wants to know enough and so
Mm.
desperately wants to protect me with knowledge. But it's a slightly different point than you were making, Jeff. I do think there's times where I withhold what I know and don't share
Yeah.
what I
Mm.
and don't share what I know because I either I either fear that the other person might know more or might, prove me wrong, or that they're not going to appreciate what I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kara, do
Mhm.
you experience this?
I do. I think a little slightly different angle. I don't necessarily resonate it as much with the hoarding of knowledge. I mean, that's not a piece that that I do. Although I see how when I do know, I think I go deep diving with the relationships and people, and maybe that's that self-pres where I'm using alliances and how many groups, and I love being a part of groups, and so um I see how sometimes those things really hit. I absolutely resonate with the piece of holding on to pieces. More for me, it's self-doubt. It's doubting that I actually have something to offer, and even as I was digging into the Enneagram before I was deciding to become a coach and just kind of trying to pray about what was like the next step for me after the kids are getting older. And my husband and other people would reflect to me. They're like, you remember everything. They're like, and this isn't something people who know me, I mean, they know they wouldn't call me an academic. I don't have a ton of books. I remember dates of people's kids' birthdays, and I remember all of like those kinds of things. And, but with the Enneagram, I learned it. And yet I had this doubt that I could actually offer it to somebody. Um, so that may be more the 6 part of the self-doubt, but I see how that 5, just the ability with the topics that I'm interested in, the ability to really go into that space of work, of holding on to that knowledge. And I'd have to explore a little bit more if that's coming out of a place of
Sure.
all of what you were speaking of, kind of am I hoarding it because of the arrogant sense that people wouldn't understand? I don't know for sure. Something
Yeah.
to think about.
Well, let's talk about the exciting part of it.
Yeah.
The 7
The
part of
7
us.
part.
Let's go.
Which you guys are very familiar with. So,
Adam, have you named the 7 part of your heart?
yes.
I have. Well, we around YEC we call him the jackal.
Yes.
He was the
or
jester.
It was the jester.
And
But
I misspoke one time, and
Yeah.
now it's the jackal.
yeah,
I misspoke, and
Yes.
Adam just took it.
yeah, I did. And so, but I have another name. I'll save it for when we talk about the unhealthy characteristics. But I have
Okay.
another name for
okay.
him as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I call mine El Macordo, which was a nickname
Love
given
it.
to me whenever I'd get too provocative
Love it.
as a pastor. And
Mm.
so I mean, yeah, it's funny because I have a McCord last name, which is Scottish, but actually was born Mexican,
Mhm.
and I didn't know that until much later in my life. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
but El Macordo captures. Like
Yeah.
Beth knows.
Oh, yes. I know when this part shows up
everybody
for
knows,
sure.
Jeff. Everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
So,
triple amen.
and there he is. So, so let's dive into the world of 7s. So they're spontaneous, they're optimistic, they run headlong into new experiences, what's fun. They're going to typically, I wouldn't say throw out safety completely, but they're definitely willing to try new things. And even if there's some anxiety, around it, it's like, hey, let's just try it. This is going to be fun. Now, the 7's core fear is the fear of being deprived, limited, bored, trapped in emotional pain, missing out on something fun. But they desire to be happy, fully satisfied, and content. So what you're going to see with your 7s is, and how the 7 wing will show up is, it's more outgoing. It can be distracted easily. It's very friendly and charming. It loves to network and connect with others. It also helps to establish these society community systems for the 6 to feel safe and secure. but it also is going to feel the freedom to connect with others, to gain a sense of guidance when they feel unsure. Because the 7 is much more apt to move into the lives of others and to connect. And so the 6 will find that ability to connect with others, to ask questions and to get the information it needs. The other thing about 7s is it also allows the 6 to feel a lot more grace and joy when, now 6s, I know you're out there and you're thinking, but Beth, we just see reality. I know, but everyone else tends to see it as pessimism.
Yeah, but they're stupid.
But the 7 part of your heart will bring levity. It will bring joy. It will bring a sense of confidence. 7s really don't see failure. They reframe things into, well, it's a new opportunity. Now, you're still a 6, so it's not going to be quite that.
Sorry, I was trying to hold it back and it didn't quite work. So I just yawned as Beth described the 7. How about that?
How do you do that?
I don't know. Does your voice really matter?
We need to keep that in the podcast. That's as a video blooper.
Oh my goodness.
Falling
Yeah.
asleep.
Another blooper.
Man, I'm so sorry.
You took a nap.
Yeah, you took a nap this afternoon. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure where I was, but we'll go with it. So 7s will bring in this sense of spontaneity and joy and freedom, even to a 6 who might see the world from more being suspicious and anxious. And so this can be a really fun dynamic. Now, it can be a push and pull, and we'll talk about the unhealthy aspects of the 7. But the 6 who wants to think of all the ways that things might not go right, the 7 is going to kind of push and say, but let's try it. Let's have some fun. Let's see where this goes. The other thing, and actually this will go probably to the more unhealthy side, is they can be really funny and witty. When you bring that 7 in, it is hilarious, but it can also turn to the worst, and we'll talk about that in a second. So Adam and Kara, both of you had 7s majority of your life, like that 7 wing. So
Yeah, I want
Adam,
to hear from Kara first.
okay, Kara? Okay, Kara, let's hear about what the 7 was like in a healthy way.
She's so much more put together than Adam. Like, she seems mature and
Keep talking all
wise,
this. Yes, just keep it coming.
composed. Adam and I have no idea what's going to come out of her mouth.
This is true. I
Love it.
cannot.
So, yeah, Kara-
I cannot argue with what you just said.
Right.
How
right.
does the 7 show up in a healthy way in your life?
Yeah, for sure. I think everything you said, Beth, just kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of, I would say the 7 balances that 6 in me. I feel that push pull of optimism, pessimism. I would say internally, I'm pessimistic, like a lot of 6s are. I'm thinking this could go wrong. I wake up at 3 a.m. with all the worry and worst case scenarios and fear of, the kid's cough is going to turn into something that they're going to be dead the next day. How many little aches and pains have I turned into, like, I'm dead. Let's just plan my funeral right now. But that's 7. But people don't see that about people. Really don't. I do not present. So when people learned I was a 6 and knew the Enneagram, they were like, I just don't see that, because I present with this optimistic energy. And it's this push pull, but it is, I think, it's the 7 that makes me remember, things can go right. Things aren't going to always go wrong. And so that's a huge gift to me.
Now,
And
Kara, does your family recognize when 7 Kara shows up?
they do, because I become, like, with my husband and kids, I become really silly and playful. My husband's a 1. So he actually, goes to a 7 in
Sure.
a place of growth. So when we meet in that middle spot, which doesn't happen all that often that we're both there at the same moment, we have a lot of fun. But yeah, the kids, I have 3 kids, and they know, would they know to say it's a 7? I'm not sure, but it's
Sure.
mom that's dancing around, making up silly songs, just being goofy and coming up with funny things. It's kind of that side. Like, my husband will be like, did you just say that? Like, that's kind of a weird, like, a way with words, like a little, with things that are just maybe a little off or funny. In my mind, they're
Do they
really,
have a
really
nickname
funny.
for it?
What was that?
Do they have a nickname for you whenever you get to Silly Mom?
Oh, good question. Not that comes to mind, but now that's going to be a dinner conversation.
I know. Yeah,
Mhm,
exactly.
mhm.
Well, and I'm curious, When you guys go on vacation, does
Yeah.
this part of you and your husband kind of come out probably more than
For
other
sure.
times?
Yes,
Mhm.
I love vacations. I love planning the vacation. That's another place I see the 5 is in the planning. But absolutely, when I'm on vacation, I feel very little anxiety. I just kind of I'm like, oh, things are going to go well, And so I see that coming out a lot. And I think the kids feel that too. They see the difference of mom, who, when I'm not doing well, the 6 can worry and want to micromanage, to then I let it go. And I just kind of am like, it's all going to work out, which is that's a better space for me sometimes to be in. So those are some of the ways that I see. Yeah. And the social side too. I think I lean into the 7 for sure in situations where I really need to be energetic, even times where I think my younger self, I was more naturally energetic and sociable. Now I see it as a gift when I'm feeling like, oh, I'm kind of spent, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can tap into this part of me that is going to bring the fun or bring the energy and the enthusiasm when I need it, which
Right.
is a gift as well.
That's awesome.
Adam, tell us about the jackal.
All my friends that we've traveled with and family members, they call it Vacation Adam. When we go on vacation, it is full blown like 7 mode. It's the 7 takes over. So yeah, most of my life growing up, I really relied heavily on the 7 part of me, and I've learned to really thank and honor that part, because without getting too vulnerable, there was, some anxiety in the home, and a little bit of instability in the home. And that part of me, really helped me, like, make it through, and help me deal with I mean, I could have picked a lot of other destructive ways to deal with what was going on inside of me, but the 7 really showed up and gave me the gift of fun and brightness and humor, and I think reframing in a healthy way. Not all reframing is bad. I think at its worst, optimism is really denial, or bypassing, some sort of spiritual bypassing. But at its best, the 7's optimism translates into resiliency, and hope. I mean, my favorite definition of hope I've ever heard, was from Phil Herndon, and Phil said that hope is, no matter how dark it gets, you can't stop looking around the corner for life. And I feel like that's the gift of the 7 to me, is like, hey, buddy, there's life out there. It's going to be okay. I mean, it reminds me not to take myself too seriously, to laugh at myself. It's okay to laugh at myself. It's okay to play. And that can push me to be the life of the party sometimes, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And the other thing is just the courage to take risks. I mean, I think my default as a type 6, if it
Okay,
feels, what's that?
right when you said that, all I could all I could think of is when taking risks was when you were at our house and there was that TikTok challenge of the
Oh,
center of gravity, and like you
For
put
men
your
and women.
you put you're on your hands and knees, then you put your arms behind your back as fast as possible, and guys can't do it. Oh man, Adam did it.
when I
Man,
saw that
his chin.
video, at your house, I said, there's no way I can't not do this. I know I can do this. I've got a strong enough core to do this. And I fell the first time and caught myself with my hands, if you remember. And then I was
Yep.
so determined to do it again. And maybe we can find the video and actually release it to our audience. I hit my face. You can see in my face, especially if you watch in slow motion, you can see my face bounce off your concrete.
You're lucky you didn't bite your tongue off.
Oh my gosh. Or lose a tooth.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean,
our
wasn't your
home's on a
jaw hurting
slab,
for
and
like
it was hardwood
I
floor.
had
I
a-
mean,
I
there
had
was
a-
no cushion at
I had a
all.
migraine headache the rest of the night, and I just pushed through it. But it
You had a concussion, Adam. I mean, we should have thrown the flag, put you on concussion protocol, and we.
It is so sad because I'm like sitting here laughing, but it was hilarious.
That is funny. What
Yeah.
is your subtype, Adam?
Well, it's a bit more one to one. I mean,
One to one. Okay.
it's a little more one to one. But since we use all three, I mean,
Absolutely.
I do see self preservation quite a bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do see that quite a bit. Well, early
Well,
on in life, it was much more one to one,
Yeah.
much more.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking that risk taking, I don't resonate as much. That part isn't as strong in
Yeah.
me, I think. But like I
Well,
see
it
that
Yeah.
as
doesn't
These
resonate with me
two.
either.
one to one is a little more repressed, I'd say, of my instincts, like social, and
Mm-hmm.
I see the social and self pres all the
Yeah.
time, and I don't see that
Mm-hmm.
the one to one
I
as
would
much.
say that my knee-jerk default reaction when it comes to an opportunity to do something big and scary or some kind of risk is to keep my feet where they are on the ground. I don't want to take a step in that direction. I don't want to do that. But for whatever reason in my life, I'll blame it on God. He's always like pushing me into these spaces where I'm having to do things that are really, really uncomfortable to me. Like I never wanted to get on a stage and talk to people, like, and I became a pastor and a teacher and like, or being on a podcast, like what I'm doing right now. It's like that. Okay. It's like who's the stand-up comedian who said, if we actually thought about what we were doing when we're in an airplane, we would all completely freak out. Like, it's like we're thousands of feet in the air right now, flying through space in this metal box. And it's like if I stopped and thought about what I'm doing right now, I'm on a podcast, I might have a panic attack. You know what I mean? Like there's a part of me that wants to go there.
Totally.
But the 7 says like you can do this. You're gonna do this. You were made for this. We've got this. Let's take the risk. Let's jump into this.
Yeah.
And it's always pushed me there my whole life. And that's a real gift.
Yeah.
Honestly, a real
It
gift.
is a gift.
It's a gift. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, we do need to talk about another part of the seven wing and how it shows up in our lives. But remember, it does have positive intent. And so, in some ways, it is trying to protect us, and it needs God's grace and healing and presence. The seven wing can make us demand that others meet our need for excitement and fun to distract us from our anxieties. We can use escape hatches, these unhealthy indulgences to avoid anxiety, self doubt, and contradictory thoughts of our inner committee. We may at times feel, or I do feel, the urge to do something spontaneous that isn't responsible or appropriate, especially if you believe you can get away with it and not get blamed. Why are you giggling over there? I may have yawned at you earlier, but you're giggling.
I'm thinking of all the funny things that you guys do.
Without thinking too. Without thinking. My wife's always like, if the line of what's appropriate is here, like an Enneagram 8 will step over the line. But you get a running start and you jump 50 miles over the line.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Running start.
And you do it
Yeah.
without thinking about it. That's the thing. The 8 will do it consciously. Like, I'm going to step over the line right now. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm in
Yes.
control. We don't even think about it.
Yeah, Beth will do that, but she like puts a tiptoe over.
Right.
Like she'll just say something with the kids around that's inappropriate.
Yeah, like I'll tiptoe though.
Just tiptoe over
Like
there.
what's the water over here like?
And if I tell other people about it, then she gets upset with me because I think it's funny enough to share with others.
So true.
Well, the seven wing helps us to avoid feelings of pain, sadness, disappointment by looking on the bright side or seeking out new adventures. So why don't we start with you, Kara? How does your seven wing at times show up in unhealthy ways?
Well, I can think of a few things. First of all, I just was thinking of something as a child that I see my seven wing coming up. And I think it was more self-protection. I mean, when I think of my childhood on some of the struggles that I went through and just going to boarding school, I think my imagination was part of, I lived in the imagination and story a lot. And I see that as being a piece of my seven. And I see how one of the things my kids kind of joke about me now is I'll say all the stories like Bambi and Charlotte's Web, any story that was like remotely sad, I could not handle as a little kid. Like I was and I think that was both the seven of trying to avoid things that made me sad. And then also the 6 of a lot of these stories were things where people were, little animals were abandoned or, things, it triggered a lot of fear in me. So that's just kind of a
It's interesting
memory
you say that
comes-
because movies were a big deal. Now, I have a high capacity for movies. My mom was a Stephen King fan and would watch horror movies, and so I didn't have siblings, so I'd sometimes watch them home
Mhm.
alone,
Oh gosh.
and just terrifying my little soul as I think back. Poor little guy, just scared to death.
Little six.
But movies were a big deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantasy's a really
Mhm.
big part of that seven
Oh
part of my
yeah,
heart.
big time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So but I avoided all those sad things. But as an adult, I see one of the ways I see it showing up in as maybe not so healthy is I can move when I'm stressed. I can become, which is partially the three, I think the busyness, but I become very scattered and just kind of unfocused, a bit like erratic. Like I'm just like, what am I needing to do here? And forgetful. And that kind of more sense of responsible side of the six kind of goes away a bit, where I just move into that. I try to pack too much in, into frame. Like maybe I have an hour before I need to leave the house. And the seven is like, let's see how much we can get done. I'm just going to laundry and I'm going to send some emails and I'm going to make some dinner. And I'm just a complete mess by the end. And then I'm more anxious, but it's that optimism of like, maybe I can get it done with that six kind of balance. Then I move to the place
It
of
does remind
stress.
me, hearing that, Bethy, that Saturday morning, Beth, whenever the kids were younger, not that that was seven, but it was like you were getting amped up to do something like that. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
it reminded me of that image, Kara, like whenever I can imagine your kids or your husband like, oh, okay, mom's here today, a little frenetic, a little
Yeah.
scattered.
Yes. Frenetic energy gets strong. Yeah, for
Uh-huh.
sure. They
Yeah.
see that in me for sure coming out where I'm just kind of got to move my body and I'm just moving things around, kind of without any real purpose.
Mm.
I also see how I can lean towards procrastination, which might be the five for things that I'm afraid of.
Mm.
Like sometimes if I have to make a doctor's appointment that you would think as a six, I'd want to figure out what's going on. Let's do it. But there's something about that where I'll tend to try to avoid it or I'll put it off or I'll try to maybe I'll just, send a text or something to somebody to just avoid having to deal with some of those things that are hard or
Well, I could totally see like the six part of your heart is like thinking of all the like worst case scenarios of going to the doctor.
for
And
sure.
then the 9 part of your heart, which is your Enneagram
Mhm.
path,
Yep.
is like, yeah, let's shut this down. Let's just avoid it at all
Yes.
costs. And
Yes.
the 7's like, that sounds like a great idea. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why do we
Yeah.
have to go there? We don't have to.
Right.
This is
Right.
great idea. Let's do something else. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then the seven or the three is like, maybe I'll just, make a list of something I can need to do or
Mhm.
something. So
Right.
absolutely. Yeah. I do see that how that could be a lot of that 9 parts.
Mm.
But that avoiding,
I wouldn't ever know
no,
what
you
that's
gotta, what's
like.
that? Right. I mean, so
Avoiding
foreign.
stuff.
Beth
So
never
foreign to
avoids.
you.
Never.
Yeah.
Adam, what about you?
Well, there's the golden shadow, right? So, I mean, one of
Mhm.
the ways that I see the jackal or the jester show up for me in an unhealthy way is when I just over rely on humor and I over rely on fun. And one of the best ways, easiest like telltale signs that this part of me is showing up in an unhealthy way is when I'm just tempted to reach for the fix. So if it's like I just need something to numb and escape whatever it is that I don't want to deal with or I don't want to feel. And so it could be binging on Netflix, it could be shopping or eating or binging on reels on my phone or something. And I just want to be really clear: none of those things are bad. The problem with all of that is it doesn't sufficiently medicate whatever you're trying to medicate. So and sometimes it just makes the problem worse, and exaggerates the problem and can get into some funky places, whether that's addiction or whatever. And I certainly have all those tendencies. So, I hinted earlier at there's a new name that I've been trying on with this part of myself, and it's catching on. And so when I see this part show up that way, one thing that helps me approach it with kindness is if I call it Hutch. So I'm learning to call this part of myself Hutch. I don't know if I've
Mhm.
ever shared this with you, but
Mm-mm.
You haven't.
Hutch sounds to me. Here's how it happened: is it's like this part of me is always reaching for escape hatches, right? And Hutch and Hatch,
Mhm.
it's close enough. So it
Yep.
just kind of I just sort of started playing with it, and it really stuck. And So whenever I see this part show up, it's and also Hutch is kind of fun. Like I kind of want to hang out with that guy, whoever he is. He probably drives like some kind of 80s Trans Am or something, you know. And
Well, I mean, what
Starsky and
immediately
Hutch.
reminded me of Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky
That's
and
right.
Hutch, right? And that's how I see him. That's really how I see him. And he
Which
just
one was Hutch?
Hutch
The
was
blonde or the brunette?
Hutch was the less serious one, right? He was the blonde. I
I don't know.
Well, now we're gonna have to watch it.
Well, I'm
I have
going
to
watch
look it up now.
You're gonna have to watch the Owen Wilson Ben Stiller remake is what you're gonna have to
Yes.
watch. But you know, Hutch is trying to help. He's trying to help me extinguish whatever, you know, fire is going on inside of me, and put out the flames, and help me kind of numb something. And so I realized that. I realized he's a great helper. He's a great asset. And there's many times where that's totally fine. Like, man, watch a movie and check out, and realize that all these other things that look so big to you and that you're so worried about, maybe it's because you're too close to it and you're overthinking it and you're too wrapped up in it. So yeah, man, go watch a movie, make a big bowl of popcorn and go do something fun. That's all great, all helpful. But again, when you over rely on that, when you overuse that, that's when it becomes, I mean, isn't that the problem with everything that we use to cope? It's usually good stuff. So it's not, it's not that the stuff is bad. We get into trouble with how we use it. So.
Yeah.
Well, in the Bible, there's the Greek word epithumeo, and thumeo means to desire, and epi just means hyper desire.
Hyper desire.
And it's when we get fixated on something, and we're going to use it beyond its normal use. So, you know, there's improper use, and then there's a demand upon something to come through for us in a way that only God can. So
and I don't think Hutch is mature enough to know the line there, Jeff. I don't think that part of, I think that part of my heart is very, very young.
Well, and you bring up a really interesting concept there, that these wings, you know, we talk about the family's responses to the various parts of our Enneagram profile. And sometimes these parts of us were not accepted by family, or they were encouraged by family. And so they can feel very young whenever we access them. You know, I think it was Kara was saying that the 7 energy showed up a lot when you were younger, versus what it may look more silly now as a middle-aged woman, but it can almost feel associated with a particular age. I mean, El McCordo is not an adult. He is not working in adulthood at all. He has no paradigm for working in I love it. But we're going to coach him up. We're going to get him. We're going to get him a job.
That's right.
Get him stable.
He's going to live on a budget.
Yeah.
Well, Adam and Kara, thank you so much for making me feel more normal as a 6 and a little less crazy in that my experience. Hey, Kara, now everybody knows where to find Adam. He's just lurking, stalking us, and hanging around near us. So, but Kara, where can people find out more about you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm a coach with your Enneagram coach, so you can find me through the directory there. I'm dabbling in social media just a little bit. So I'm on Instagram as Kara R Coaching, and I have a Facebook page, Kara R Coaching. So those are places. Yeah.
We'll dive into that 7 wing and just have a ball on Instagram. Just go for it.
Fun.
Do it. Do it.
Go
And
crazy.
so for those that are curious to find Adam, you know, and Kara, on our directory page, you go to myenneagramcoach.com. And that's where our certified coaches are. So you can go in there and type in their name, and you'll see them pop up.
Well, remember, if you're interested in learning more about the Enneagram, head on over to yourenneagramcoach.com. If you want to take your Enneagram knowledge further into where it can really change your life, find one of our coaches like Adam and like Kara. And for those of you who want to bless others and by becoming an Enneagram coach, be sure to check out our industry-leading certification program at yourenneagramcoach.com. Our coaching team is looking forward to help you to fulfill some dreams of being a blessing in the lives of others.
And as always, remember that the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder. It is the gospel that transforms us. So thanks for tuning in. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about Type 7's wings. So we can't wait to see you there.